In the middle of the 7th century, the Viking expansion started shaking the political and cultural development of Europe. The Baltic world encountered the Vikings rather early. The Hervarar saga describes the campaign of Ivar Vidfamne, the 7th century king of Svealand, into the Curonia. Saxo Grammaticus mentions that in the 8th century the Curonians were even ruled by the Swedish Vikings. Historians know about Ragnar Lodbrog's raid into Curonia and Sambia. This military commander may be identified with Ragnar, the leader of the Danish Vikings, who besieged Paris in 845 and who died during the siege. Thus his raid into the Baltic land had to be undertaken at least several years earlier than the siege of Paris. In the 9th century, the raids of Scandinavian and Danish Vikings became regular. In around 860, they were attacked by Olaf, the Swedish king of Birka, and Eric of Uppsala. The saga of St. Olaf claims that Eric subdued Curonia and other lands in the east. Vita Ansgari by Rimbert describes the siege of the Curonian castle of Apole, which occurred in 853 and 54. The unsuccessful raid of Hadingus into Curonia in the second half of the 9th century was described by Saxo Grammaticus. Hadingus himself was captured. Captivity was also the fate of Viking Egil, who tried to plunder on the Curonian land. In the 10th century, the Danes became very active on the southeastern shore of the Baltic Sea. The first half of the 10th century was marked by the raid of Harald Bluetooth's son into Sambia and by Starkater's army raiding Curonia. Historical sources mention Lokeras and Dornas, the first kings of Curonia. They say that the Danes occupied Sambia, killed all men, and forced women to marry them. They allegedly left their Danish wives behind and became strongly attached to their foreign wives and no longer wanted to return home. They fell in love with the foreign land, and this love was stronger than they felt for their homeland. The large Viskautai burial site near the Curonian lagoon also has graves of the Danish Vikings. At the beginning of the 10th century, the Danes tried to settle in the Semigalian lands. Arturas Mickiewicz believes that Denmark, being on the verge of becoming a state, sought to establish themselves in the Baltic territory. Meanwhile, the Swedes, who called themselves kings, continued their plundering activities, which was so characteristic of Vikings. Historian Bronius Dundulis claims that the 11th century saw the change in the character of the Viking expansion. The importance of the route from the Varangians to the Greeks resulted in regular invasions of Western Balts by Denmark and Sweden. Two branches of this route supposedly crossed the Baltic land, that is, one branch started in Sambia and the other in the mouth of the Daugava River. In around 1009 to 1010, Canute the Great organized a campaign against Western Slavs and Sambia. He succeeded in conquering it. However, all the conquests and taxations were short-lived. In the second half of the 11th century, Canute IV had to repeatedly conquer the same Sambians, Curonians, and Estonians. The Knitlinga saga, the saga of the Canute's descendants, states that Canute defeated 10 kings. However, Adam of Bremen, who lived at the time of these campaigns, did not mention that Estonians or Sambians were conquered by the Danes. In 1161, during the rule of King Valdemar I, one of the last campaigns of the Danes against the Curonians of Palanga was held. Adam of Bremen is brief and categorical in his descriptions of the Curonians who fought against the Vikings. To him, the Curonians seemed to be the cruelest of all tribes, heathens, and rich in gold and horses. Other Scandinavian sources also mention the permanent defense of the Viking land and seashores from the raiding Curonians and Kvens, or Finns. The Heimskringla describes the events of 1042 to 1066. It mentions twice that the Curonians engaged in piracy near the Scandinavian shores. It says that Sven Olafsson, who only recently had become the Konung, had to fight against the raiding Wends, Curonians, and other people from the east, as it put it. The fighting was not very successful, as in 20 years the same Sven still patrolled the shores all around the year, in order to protect his people from the same raiders. Icelandic sagas also mention the pirating Curonians. Even at the beginning of the 13th century, when Scandinavian and German vessels dominated the Baltic Sea, the Curonian issue was still pending. Even Pope Gregory VII complained to King Olav Kyrre of Norway regarding churches destroyed by the Curonians. Scandinavian sources describe the Curonians as pirates. while Sambians and Semigalians are described as close Scandinavian-Baltic trade partners by both Icelandic sagas and runic inscriptions. 4 out of 9 runic inscriptions of the 11th century that mention the Balts also mention Semigalians, Semigalia, or Semigalian. Others mention the Runo or Ruhu Island, Livonia, Daugava, called Dvina, and Vindau, Curonia. Archaeological finds on the Lithuanian seashore, in the Daugava basin and in Gotland, as well as runic inscriptions and other sources, witness that in the 11th century the Baltic tribes, especially Semigalians, Sambians and Curonians, had trade relations with Scandinavians. In the 12th century, German merchants started dominating in the Baltic Sea and in Gotland, and they disturbed the existing trading relations between Gotland and other Scandinavian areas, as well as the Baltic lands. Scandinavians had well-known trading centers. The largest trade center in Denmark was Haithabu, Sweden had Birka, and a neighboring trade center of Sigtuna, which was founded later. However, the most important trading center was Visby in the island of Gotland. As of old, it has been the crossing point of trade routes in the Baltic Sea. In Viking times, this island became incredibly rich. Archaeologists have found as many as 700 treasures that were hidden at that time. Some of them contained up to 10 kilograms of silver. Some 40,000 Arabic silver coins were found in Gotland alone, while a total of 17,000 of them were found in other Swedish regions and Denmark. Arabic documents evidence that the Vikings got silver in exchange for beaver furs and war prisoners. Balanga was a major trading point in Viking times. A small port was built on one of the lagoon lakes, while people lived in 2 settlements. One settlement was established near Birute Hill and was encircled with mounds and walls, and the other settlement was co-inhabited by Curonians and newcomer Vikings. The great majority of ship rivets and nails found in Balanga area evidence that the Curonians were good seamen and built sailing ships. Another Curonian trading center was located in Seeburg near the present-day Grobinja. It was here that a rune stone was found. However, the largest trading center of the Viking era was the Prussian town of Truso. It was founded at the lower reaches of the Nogat, near the present-day Polish city of Elbing. The town was built on the shore of a bay that existed in ancient times. The explored town was 450 meters in length and 350 meters in width. It was encircled by a small mound. Artifacts from all over the world were excavated on the site. Arabic coins witness the relations of the town with the Orient, and coins of Charlemagne with the most powerful Western Empire of that time. Rock crystal, silver, golden and amber jewelry is as exquisite as that found in other European towns and cities of major importance of that era. An artisan's shop was explored in Truso, and the findings included scales for weighing the precious metals and coins and a miniature special hammer used for making silver and golden jewelry. Many pieces of jewelry were made of traditional amber and antler. Needles, combs, pins, and even bone skates prove that the town had a strong tradition of bone and horn processing, which was characteristic to the Balts. Another Sambian trading town was Viskjotei. Man-made barrows tell us that the town flourished in the 8th to 10th centuries. 500 barrows are the burial place for Sambians as well as many Scandinavians who were buried with rich silver and brass ornaments, arms, bridles, saddles, etc. A settlement covering 3 hectares has been recently discovered near this huge Sambian and Scandinavian necropolis. The settlement especially thrived in the first half of the 10th century. The Irtekapinis necropolis was found nearby. Vladimir Kulakov attributes it to the Curonians. This trading center declined in around 950 when Danish kings started their raids on the western Baltic lands.
Kuršių ir prūsų pirkliai be abejo lankėsi Gotlande. Tai liudija ne tik rašytiniai šaltiniai, bet ir archeologiniai radiniai.
Curonian and Prussian merchants have undoubtedly visited Gotland. Written sources as well as archaeological findings serve as a witness to that. The nation's past is witnessed not only by Icelandic sagas but also by folk songs. They tell us about young men, Vaizbūnai, who were brave merchants and seamen and who sailed to Visby, and that is why they are called Vaizbūnai. They allegedly brought back arms, textiles, salt and articles made by skillful artisans of Gotland. Ancient Danes had a nice saga about Vaizbūnas Vidgaudas. The saga tells us that Sambian Vidgaudas was known to be a smart merchant and an excellent seaman. Once he was returning to his native Sambia and Curonian pirates attacked him. Vidgaudas knew the sea very well, so he turned to the west, and in 2 days he reached the Danish port of Haithabu. Vidgaudas gave a lavish gift to Knut Levard, the ruler of the land. He stacked expensive furs in front of the ruler's throne. The saga claims that furs were presented in 40 big bundles, each bundle containing 5 smaller bundles, and each smaller bundle containing 40 furs. Vidgaudas received more favors from the Duke when he sailed to Novgorod, and convinced the Duke of Novgorod to marry his daughter to Knut Levard. Having received lavish gifts from both rulers, the Baltic Odyssey safely returned to his native shore. In Viking times, the Baltic tribes traded with all Baltic areas. Upon the arrival of the Knights of the Sword and the Knights of the Cross, the traditional relations that Baltic seamen and merchants had with countries on the Baltic Sea experienced a decline.